Eddie, we're back here again, Riyadh. The Riyadh season officially underway here. It feels mental that it's not even been 12 months since it all really started with Tyson Fury and Francis Ngannou. The events that we've been treated to, and another spectacular one this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a whirlwind, to say the least. You know, going back to the Tyson Fury Ngannou card, which we weren't involved with, and you know, we had an event the same night in Mexico, and you know, it's only really when I saw the scale of that event, you know, saw the fight night, the fight week, and I realised that there was a new movement in boxing, and it was one that, as I said to His Excellency, we needed to be on the train for. And what we've seen has definitely been the most enjoyable year of my career in boxing, because it's been so refreshing to see the big fights get made. It's been so refreshing to see this new ignition of commercial drive into boxing, around promos, around press conferences, around grand arrivals, and around the cards and the depth of the cards, and particularly through promoters starting to work together. And you know, when I look at the relationship between Matchroom and Queensberry, you know, there's another fight that by the time this goes out will either be announced or will be announced shortly. And I can't actually quite believe what's happened. Like, I know we're not on a great run against them, but that will change. But for me, it's just really reinvigorated my passion for the sport and my love to see the best fights. You know, I look at this weekend with Bivol Beterbiev. For me, I don't think there's a better fight in boxing. You know, everything that we've been through with Dmitry, you know, the World Championship wins, the fights through COVID, the victory against Canelo Alvarez. This is it. You know, this is his lifelong dream to be undisputed world champion. And for me, Bivol Beterbiev is just one of the greatest, purest fights in the sport. And, you know, we're seeing it time and time again. And we're seeing Riyadh season expand outside of Riyadh and around the world. I mean, the Crawford Madrimov card in Los Angeles was incredible. Wembley was mind-blowing. And now we're back here. And then before you know it, it will be December 21. And it will be Fury Usyk 2. And then before you know it, it could be AJ Dubois 2 in February. So we're all riding this crest of the wave. Long may it continue. And you've got to enjoy these experiences while they're here, because this is an incredible time for boxing.
You touched on Beterbiev and Bivol there as the best fight that could be made in boxing right now. But when you think about recent years, it must also stack up high there as well, mustn't it? As one of the best fights we've seen in recent times.
It's like, you know, it's a generational fight. And the thing is with this fight is this is the fight that makes you a generational great. Both fighters will go down as pound for pound great fighters. But this is the win that gives you generational greatness. Undisputed light heavyweight world champion. And you know, you look back, I always feel that history comes over time. So we never really appreciate it as much when it's the now. And you look back to great fights and great fighters, and you know, you go back to the four kings of, you know, Leonard, Hagler, Duran, you know, and I think it's like really getting in the moment. We've got to appreciate what's happening now, because this is a fight we'll look back on, you know, as we look back on so many of those great fights. And I think this is the fight that will go down in history as one of the fights from our era that was right up there, like you said, not just now, but of our era. And it's just one of those fights. No one knows how this fight's going to play out. And it can only be a thriller.
We've been through so much with Dmitry and World of Boxing to get to this stage, but along the way, did you ever sort of lose hope that we would ever see this fight before, obviously, His Excellency stepped in?
You know, it was really difficult with Dmitry early on, because Andrei Rybinski, Vadim, World of Boxing had done an incredible job. Kathy Duva involved in the early years. You got this incredible fighter from Russia that no one knew anything about, but was really, really good. And it's so difficult to bring an international fighter into a market. You know, his English wasn't what it is now. And it's like, how do you sell that fighter to the audience without him being an American fighter or a British fighter, or without speaking English, or, you know, and for the early years, just like the Gennady Golovkins and the Vasily Lomachenkos and all of those guys who had to come in, make their name, gain their respect, show everyone how great they were, and then move on to get international recognition. And, you know, even like before the Canelo Alvarez fight, Bivol probably wasn't getting the recognition that his ability or his performances deserved. That was the breakout fight. You know, he beat the pound for pound #1 on the planet. So that was a massive turning point for him, you know, but he's been extremely successful for a long time now. Don't forget, it wasn't too long ago he schooled Zurdo Ramirez in Abu Dhabi. But he, like many, suffered through that COVID experience of inactivity. You know, had to fight Craig Richards in the bubble in Manchester or London or wherever it was. Like it was difficult to get him out and get him paid. And it's been an incredible journey. And this is it. This is the pinnacle of everything.
Artur has knocked out everyone he's ever faced in boxing. So on one hand, I'm sure there's concern for Dmitry on Saturday. But if there's anyone that can solve the puzzle, I guess it's him with his footwork and just how brilliant he is to watch.
Yeah, that's why it's the classic fight. You know, you've got one guy. And by the way, Beterbiev is so much more than just an aggressive knockout artist. Like, he's very good at what he does. He doesn't just maraud forward. He cuts off the ring very well. He always keeps the pressure on. His punt selection is very, very good. He loses rounds, but he's always putting you under pressure. And to survive the pressure, your footwork has to be really good. Your movement has to be really good. But you also have to gain the respect at some point. And you can't just run. But Dmitry doesn't run. I mean, if you watch what Dmitry does, watch him against Canelo Alvarez. But this is a big, strong man in Artur Beterbiev who carries not just you know, a big armory of power, but a real bulk of confidence and resolve that he will get you. And that's the thing, when you fight Artur Beterbiev, there's a ticking time bomb. And as it ticks round, it's really the fighters that can, you know, make the time go faster. Others who can't keep him off, it will just move like that speed. But with Dmitry, it's going to move much slower. How many rounds will it take for him to hurt Dmitry, get hold of Dmitry? Can he even do it? You know, but you need to kind of prolong that as much as possible in the fight. And what happens, you know, when you look at fights like Callum Smith, he wasn't able to prolong him enough before those shots started raining in and before the distance got closed. Anthony Yarde probably did a little bit of a better job, you know. He had the power. If you look back at the fights like Callum Johnson, I was watching that fight the other night. I mean, you know, he had a lot of success there and he's getting old. You know, he's coming off knee surgery, but he's also lived the life and he's still that monster. But it's going to be, you know, it's a pure 50-50 fight. But if there's anybody to beat Artur Beterbiev, it's Dmitry Bivol.
Do you think, like you just said there, age and injuries, if there was a time you'd want to ever face him, not that many people would, but if there was a time, now is that time?
Yeah, I don't think there's a good time to face Artur Beterbiev, but always coming off an injury, always getting a little bit older, but he's not showing any signs of decline. That was, you know, when we had Callum Smith fighting him, I was thinking, timing is everything. He's getting old, you know. I really fancied that fight, and he won comfortably. And, you know, the Yarde performance, you know, I think many felt, oh, is he, you know, showing a few signs? You know, he travelled over to UK. Yarde's a good fighter, big puncher, you know, but he got hold of him. And, you know, you go back even further to maybe the fighters that are a little bit more skilled in their prime. Guys like Godzwitz, you know, it took him, was it the 12th round to get hold of him? You know, he was winning the fight, but it's just, like I said, it's just a ticking time bomb. And you've got to make sure that you make that clock tick as slowly as possible so that you can get out of there before the tick, tick, boom.
In terms of pound for pound discussions for these two, already in the top 10, there's not been a light heavyweight, undisputed light heavyweight champion since Roy Jones over 20 years ago. Where does the winner go from here? Are they in that 1, 2, 3 slot?
Yeah, I mean, I think for Beterbiev, he talks about moving up to cruiserweight. You know, is there a fight with Opetaia? I think it's a tremendous fight. For Dmitry, all of a sudden, I mean, you know, you have to look at that Canelo fight. I know Saul, he will want to avenge that defeat. I think Eddie Hearn also knows boxing inside out. He knows, especially after the first fight, how tough that fight is. But if Dmitry was to win that fight, Canelo could fight him for the undisputed light heavyweight world championship. And that's a big carrot. I mean, that all of a sudden makes it worth rolling the dice for legacy. But listen, that's one for the future. But, you know, you're in a great position. And by the way, Dmitry can still fight at 168. You know, it's something we've looked at before. But, you know, sitting there victorious on Saturday night as the undisputed light heavyweight world championship winner would put him, for me, definitely top 5 pound for pound, probably top 3 pound for pound, and one of the biggest names in the sport.
Do you think that if this is the fight that everyone expects, that we could actually see this again, maybe twice, 3 times?
Yeah, I think it can only be a thriller. And, you know, when you look at the dance partners for both, you know, you never know. And, you know, His Excellency, if he sees a thriller in front of him, there's every chance he might want to do it again.
His Excellency could probably just do this fight on its own and that's it. But we've also got a massive undercard as well, just to go through Skye and Jai as well. Big opportunities again for them on Saturday.
Massive. I mean, look, Jai has been, you know, since Jai beat Jordan Thompson and His Excellency watched our show and said, I like him, his life changed forever. You know, obviously going back to the first defence, the knockout victory, then the Bradis fight to get his belt back. Now, another one. Jai wants to unify. It's the only thing that's in his mind. And sometimes these fights are quite dangerous because they're a little bit harder to get up for. You know, I don't think that's going to be the case with Jai because he's a professional, he's an animal, and he loves to fight. But in his mind, he just wants Zerdo, Callum Smith, Michelin. That's all he really wants. So he's got to be switched on and professional in this fight and get the job done because those fights will present themselves in early 2025. For Skye and Raven, the first female world championship fight in Saudi Arabia and as part of Riyadh season, it's a massive opportunity for them. You know, it's another Matchroom v Queensbury. So a bit nervous on that one, but it's a really good fight. And stylistically, it's a really, really good fight. Skye's hardly lost a round in the pros. And there's kind of like this perception, you know, you've seen like that she runs and you go back to the footwork of Dmitry Bivol, it's the same with Skye. She's never quite in range. She makes you fall short. She's punching harder now. And actually, you know, it's a great matchup because Raven's got the style to, you know, put the pressure on, which they all try and do, but she's also got a tailor-made style for Skye. And Skye won't have to adapt her style too much. You know, there's always been, when you turn pro, it's like, oh, you've got a bit of an amateur style, so you want to fight more like a pro. I think she's made some of those tweaks, but she doesn't really need to worry about that in this fight because Raven will be right in front of her. And I wouldn't be surprised if she stopped her in this fight. I think it'll be a tough fight, but this is the fight for both girls to break out as a star name in women's boxing. And it's a big moment for Riyadh season, and you've seen that from the response here. So, you know, big fight for Jai, big fight for Skye, and even, you know, the non-matchroom fighters on the card. I'm looking forward to seeing Fabio against Fraser, two guys that I'm very fond of. You know, Ben Whittaker, you know, has become a superstar of boxing. Other than there's Eubank, you know, but, you know, other than that, I think it's a really, really good night of boxing. And like you said, with a fight like this as a main event, you didn't need much of an undercard, but this is what we're consistently seeing in Riyadh season.
Just on Skye, do you think that if this fight goes the way, like you've described it, the style is maybe tailor-made for her, if she does this in the fashion that we've seen her previous fight, she'll finally start getting the credit for those performances?
Yeah, I think that in women's boxing, until you start ticking off those names or those sort of higher profile fights, you don't really get the credit. There is no doubt it is easier to become a world champion in female boxing than it is in men's boxing. So you have to do a little bit more to get the credit and the recognition. What she's done is win every fight at a canter. You know, Sarah Mahfoud, outside of Amanda Serrano, was the #1 in the division on BoxRec. It was that bad a mismatch. It was 190, like on, you know. Then Diana Vargas comes in, big, strong, powerful. Same result. Raven is a level above, in my opinion, both of those girls actually. But if she does what I think she might do in this fight, then you start have to talk about her in the same breath as, you know, the obviously Taylor sits right up there, but the Mayers and the Baumgartners, and for me, she's always wanted that Amanda Serrano fight, but you need to get the wins and the credibility for people to say, do you know what? That fight needs to happen. And I think victory on Saturday will give her that. I'm not sure Amanda will take the fight, but she's got her own business to take care of with Katie Taylor. But, this is a fight that puts, like I said, both girls to that level of the names we just talked about. And it's a massive moment for both.
And just to loop back to Jai as well, you spoke about how elusive it's proven to be to get him those unifications. Now that we've got Zerdo and Chris Smith headlining another Riyadh season card, I guess the pieces of the jigsaw are starting to fall into place.
Who wants to fight Jai Opetaia? Like, he's a monster. But sooner or later, you have to push for greatness, and you have to obviously push financially as well. But when we had a meeting recently with Jai Opetaia and His Excellency, it was very clear what the roadmap was. Undisputed at cruiserweight and then move to heavyweight. And you've got to get through Saturday night, and 2025 is about ticking off all the champions and becoming undisputed as quickly as possible.
I believe Conor Benn's flying in for this fight. He'll have a close eye on Chris, I imagine. Is that still the plan, do you think, 2025 early?
Look, I think that, Conor has a lot of options, and actually, all away from a believe or make-believe Canelo Alvarez fight, I don't know where Chris Eubank's big money fights are away from Conor Benn. For Conor, we've got Haney, the Tank Davis fight's been talked about. You've got Boots, you've got so many big fights at 147 or 154 pounds. But the biggest fight for Conor as well is Chris Eubank Jr. So it would be moronic for us not to explore that. Conor would have been out for probably around 10 to 12 months when his return happens. But he's made it very clear to us, I don't want any warm-up fights. Throw me in the biggest fight. I'm ready. I'm like a caged animal. Let me at them. And he wants to take Eubank's head clean off his shoulders. And he will do everything to try and do it. It will be one of the most exciting fights our country has seen for a long time. We know the backstory. We know the legacy. We know the family rivals. And the first time this was on sale was the fastest selling fight we've ever had in the UK at the O2. And now it's 5 times the size. It's a monster. And before, there was bad blood, but it was half respectable. Your dad was a great. My dad was a great. We walked the same path. Now, the respect has gone. It's going to be violent. And if it happens, it will break records in the UK. So for me, you're speaking my language.
When you were sat ringside for Joshua Dubois, I guess the mind starts to run away with who else can do these sort of events. Do you think that's the sort of fight that can go big outdoors in the UK?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it sells out Wembley, sells out Spurs, wherever you want to do it. The build-up. Imagine the build-up. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it got fruity on Saturday. Pause. But it's a fight that, for me, has to get made. And I don't think there's anything that can stop anyone from making that fight.
All attention, though, definitely on Bivol, Beterbiev. Just as we sit here a few days out from fight night, how's the mind? What's your fight night prediction? I guess it's just been changing all the time.
I am. The way I feel about this fight, forget that I'm Bivol's promoter. I'm feeling so lucky that I'm going to sit there and watch that fight. And I think anybody around the world should feel the same. Whether you're watching on DAZN, whether you're in the Kingdom Arena, this is a fight that we've been gifted with that will go down as one of the greats of our generation.
Eddie, thank you very much for your time.